We're often told a simple story about Africa's freedom, a story where the continent was passively liberated by the grand impersonal march of history. We're taught that independence was simply inevitable, a foregone conclusion written in the stars, as if colonial powers simply packed their bags when the time was right. This narrative suggests that liberation just happened, a gentle unfolding that occurred because the world suddenly became more civilized. A convenient tale that erases the struggle, the sacrifice, and the sheer force of will required. But what if that's a lie? A carefully constructed myth designed to downplay a revolutionary truth. What if the colonial project was designed to be permanent, a system of extraction and control with no expiration date? What if Africa was never meant to be free? And the only reason the continent stands tall today, charting its own course against incredible odds, is because a handful of fearless men and women refused to accept the world as it was presented to them. They refused to stay silent. These were the leaders the world tried to silence. Their voices were deemed too loud, their ideas too radical. They were the dreamers they called dangerous, visionaries whose blueprint for a united, self-reliant Africa threatened the established global order. They were the heroes they labeled rebels, patriots who were demonized by the very powers they sought to overthrow. Yet these very rebels, these so-called dangerous men, are the architects of modern Africa. They are the ones who shaped the continent we know. Their legacy is not a relic of the past. It is a living, breathing force that continues to inspire progress and unity. Their fight for political freedom laid the groundwork for today's battles for economic empowerment and cultural renaissance. Today, we pull back the curtain on the sanitized versions of history. We honor 5 Pan-African giants whose positive impact still echoes across every corner of the continent. 5 men who dared to defy empires and, in doing so, changed Africa forever. In the grand theater of history, some leaders build nations, others awaken continents. Kwame Nkrumah was a man who dared to do both. When Ghana raised its flag on March 6, 1957, becoming the first sub-Saharan nation to break from colonial rule, the sound of celebration in Accra was deafening. It was a symphony of hope, a powerful declaration of self-determination that echoed across the globe. But in the corridors of colonial power, the world didn't celebrate. They panicked. This wasn't just one colony slipping away. It was a crack in the very foundation of an empire. Because at the heart of this seismic shift was a leader whose vision extended far beyond his own nation's borders. Nkrumah wasn't just freeing Ghana. He was igniting Africa. He famously declared that Ghana's independence was meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. This wasn't mere rhetoric. He immediately put his philosophy into action, transforming Ghana into a launchpad for continental progress. He poured resources into ambitious projects, not just for Ghana, but as a blueprint for all of Africa. Under his leadership, the landscape of the nation was redrawn. Schools and universities were built, opening the doors of knowledge to a generation hungry for learning. Roads and industries expanded, creating the arteries of a new, self-sufficient economy. For the first time, women gained widespread access to higher education, empowering them to become leaders and innovators. Science and technology were prioritized, with a focus on building a future driven by African intellect. State corporations were established to ensure that the nation's wealth would be used to grow African economies, not enrich foreign powers. But perhaps his greatest achievement wasn't built of concrete or steel. It was an idea. He inspired more than 30 African nations to fight for their freedom, offering them political, financial, and moral support. He championed the grand, audacious vision of a United States of Africa and was a principal architect of the Organization of African Unity. And in doing so, he lit the inextinguishable torch of Pan-African consciousness. Nkrumah didn't just dream of a free continent. He laid the foundation and drew the blueprint. He made millions of Africans believe, for the first time, that a united, prosperous, and self-reliant Africa was not just a possibility, but their destiny. 27 years behind bars. 27 years of chains, isolation, and silence. Anyone else would have broken. Mandela didn't. He walked out of prison with no anger, only vision. Mandela achieved what many believed impossible. He united a deeply divided nation, avoided civil war, built racial reconciliation, strengthened democratic institutions, became a global symbol of peace. But many forget his Pan-African impact. Mandela supported liberation movements across the continent, from Zimbabwe to Mozambique, from Angola to Namibia. He believed Africa's freedom was one struggle, a shared destiny. Mandela didn't just lead a nation, he lifted the entire continent's spirit. If Africa ever had a voice that echoed with the raw, unfiltered truth of a continent yearning to be free, it was the voice of Patrice Lumumba. In an era of carefully scripted transitions from colonial rule, Lumumba was a firebrand, an intellectual whose passion for genuine sovereignty was matched only by his courage. He didn't just speak for the Congo, he spoke for the soul of a newly awakening Africa, articulating a vision that was as brilliant as it was dangerous. At only 35, he became the first democratically elected Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo. On Independence Day, in the presence of the Belgian king, he cast aside diplomatic niceties and delivered a speech that shook the world. He spoke not of gratitude, but of the suffering, humiliation, and injustice of colonial rule. In that moment, he immediately declared that Congo's vast wealth, its diamonds, its copper, its cobalt, belonged not to foreign corporations or colonial powers, but exclusively to its people. This was a revolutionary idea, far too revolutionary for the powerful Western nations and multinational corporations who had profited from the Congo's exploitation for decades. They saw a future where their access to strategic minerals was threatened, and they viewed Lumumba not as a patriot, but as a radical obstacle to their interests. Lumumba's vision for a truly sovereign nation was built on 5 uncompromising pillars. First, economic self-reliance, to build a nation where Congolese hands would process their own resources and create their own prosperity. Second, true independence, rejecting the flag independence that left economic power in the hands of former colonizers. Third, absolute national control of natural resources, ensuring that the country's wealth would fund its own development. Fourth, unwavering Pan-African unity, believing that the strength of one African nation was the strength of all. And fifth, ending all forms of external manipulation, charting a course of non-alignment in the Cold War. Even though his time in leadership was tragically cut short after only a few months, Lumumba's ideology became a sacred blueprint for African nationalism and self-determination. His unwavering stance lit a fire that could not be extinguished. He directly inspired a generation of leaders and movements who carried his torch forward. Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Muammar Gaddafi's early Pan-African vision. Countless African youth movements demanding economic justice, and liberation fighters across the continent, from Angola to South Africa. Though his enemies silenced his voice, they could not silence his truth. Today, Patrice Lumumba lives on as the eternal symbol of uncompromising African dignity and the ultimate sacrifice for sovereignty. In just 4 years, Thomas Sankara achieved what some countries couldn't achieve in decades. He transformed Burkina Faso with a bold vision of African pride. His achievements include vaccinating 2.5 million children, doubling food production, planting millions of trees, promoting women's rights, banning forced marriages, replacing luxury cars with bicycles for officials, building roads and rail without foreign aid. Sankara famously said, "He who feeds you controls you." So, he chose self-reliance, an Africa that rises on its own feet. He wasn't just a president, he was a movement, a mindset, a revolution. His legacy still fuels African activism today. While the world focused on his controversies, Africa remembers something else. Gaddafi was one of the strongest financial supporters of African liberation. His Pan-African contributions include proposing a single African currency backed by gold funding the African Union, supporting African tech and infrastructure projects, building world-class schools and hospitals, offering free healthcare and education in Libya, backing liberation struggles across the continent. Under Gaddafi, Libya became one of the most developed nations in Africa. He pushed relentlessly for African unity, a single passport, a single army, a single economic system. His dream was bold, an Africa too powerful to be controlled. These leaders came from different lands, different cultures, different eras, but their hearts beat for one purpose: a free, united, dignified Africa. Nkrumah awakened the continent. Mandela healed it. Lumumba defended its dignity. Sankara rebuilt its pride. Gaddafi invested in its future. Their positive impact lives in every African parliament, every liberation movement, every young African dreaming bigger than borders, every call for unity. These men did not just change Africa. They created the Africa we stand on today. And now their dream rests with us, because Africa's story is still unfolding, and the next chapter is ours to write. If you believe these stories must be told, if you want more powerful Pan-African content, let the world remember the heroes they tried to silence.